This is so bizarre. Let me pose. Hello, my name is Celine, and I go by the name Sporadically Reading. On Instagram, I have had a Bookstagram account for, I think around 2 years now. Yes, it's been like technically 2 years, which is insane to think about. And now I've decided to talk about books in front of a video camera, which is probably a bad idea, but I'm going to do it. I've been watching a lot of booktube videos for so long, and I love them. I put them on in the background when I'm doing stuff. I get such good recommendations from them, so I thought I would kind of wrap up my own reading. I don't know if anyone is interested in what I have to say. Maybe I will live to regret this, but for now, I got the motivation to do it, and I'm gonna do it. So yeah, okay, without further ado, I'm gonna get into it. The first book that I read in the month of February was a really quick read. It's White on White by Ayşegül Savaş. I actually recently got her first book from the library. It's called Walking on the Ceiling, so I'll be reading this in March probably. I'll probably do a little post on Instagram with both of the books. But yeah, so this is her second book. It's called White on White. It was a super short read. It's 174 pages. I read this in one night, and this really reminds me of Rachel Cusk. That's like immediately what I thought when I read it. And it's very introspective. It's a bit aloof. There's a female narrator who is, she's a graduate student. She moves to the city, this small town really, in either Italy or France, I want to say. She doesn't actually specify, and she's studying Gothic nudes, so hence the cover right here. Living with her tenant, who is her professor's wife, and this wife is it's really about her, and about kind of their dual relationship. It's very like Mulholland Drive, Persona kind of vibes, if you've seen any of those films. Basically, like, we learn more about this wife who is having, a very troubled marriage, and I think her and her professor husband end up splitting, and she's narrating her story to our narrator. So we're kind of like getting an understanding of her life, but through the eyes of our narrator, and they're kind of foils in a way. One of them, obviously our narrator is young. She is, maybe in her late 20s. And she's very much at the beginning of her academic career, whereas the older woman is kind of retired, and she's an artist, but she's kind of reflecting on her life as opposed to, just starting her career. All that being said, I thought it was pretty good. If I'm being honest, I don't know if it left the biggest impression on me, but I think that's a personal preference thing. I would say the same thing with like a Rachel Cusk. Like, when I read Outline, I really liked it. You can't argue with its merits or whatever. It's very like well written, well thought out, just like this was, but it wasn't necessarily like an all-time fave for me. It wasn't something I would necessarily go back to personally. But if you like Rachel Cusk, if you like that kind of writing, definitely check this out. I think it's really cool. It would be really cool to kind of check out this newer author, and yeah, you might find a new favorite. So this is White on White. All right. For the second book that I read, it was The Baghdad Eucharist by Sinan and Antoon. This book, I really, really liked it. It's a very political book. It's very tragic, actually, but obviously not in like a contrived way. Like this, it tells the reality of life in Iraq for specifically for a Chaldean family. So it basically is actually set over the course of one day, and we follow this man named Yusuf, and he is elderly, and he is living in Iraq. But his various siblings, some of them have passed away, some of them have moved away to other countries. They're in diaspora. So as we follow Yusuf throughout this day, we learn about his family. So it's very much kind of setting up this, I guess it's just a multi-generational picture of a Chaldean family, And in that, it gets into, you know, a lot of Iraqi history and politics and things like that. Yeah, all of that being said, it's very, very good. If any of that sounds like something that you would like, 100% pick this up, go for it. Next, I read a very exciting book, Either Or. I was so lucky to be sent a proof of this. It's coming out in May of 2022. This is the sequel to Elif Batuman's The Idiot. It follows a girl named Selin, who incidentally, that's also my name. It follows a Turkish American girl named Selin, who is a student at Harvard in 1995. So The Idiot is a story of her freshman year in 1995. This is her sophomore year, and again, it's a sequel. In terms of like, if you need to have read The Idiot in order to pick this up, I think that this very much picks up on where The Idiot leaves off. So in The Idiot, there's this kind of like romance that's not really like unrequited love, basically, between Selin and Ivan, who is an older Hungarian PhD student. And this picks up off of that. So Selin is like reflecting on how that went, what went wrong, why did Ivan like not, you know, why was he kind of being flaky and strange. Ivan's a very interesting character, but so is Selin. Anyway, so I think you probably would want to read The Idiot before reading this. I think like after the first quarter of the book, we're really like it's new stuff is happening, even though like Selin's experiences of the first book are very much overshadowing everything she's doing here. So I think you might want to have read The Idiot, but it's not really in terms of plot, though. It's really actually not a plot-driven novel. It's really about the experience. Oh, I need to focus this. Anyway, I'm new to this, as you can see. Whoa, we're both in focus. Okay, it's really about the experience. It's about the writing of Batuman, of the way that Selin is kind of like stumbling through life and figuring out who she needs to be and all that stuff. So basically, if you like The Idiot, you will definitely like this. There's a lot more in here, I think. So I gave The Idiot 4 stars when I first read it, and it's probably a 5-star read, honestly, but I think that I don't know, I think this one just like had this little extra something like sprinkled in there that made it a 5-star read for me. I think that a lot of the themes in here, again, like I was talking about, that touch on like, besides just, love and self-identity, like the themes in here that touch more on like writing and literature, and I don't know, like she at the very end she talks about like being a subject in your own story, which I thought was really interesting, and that really spoke to me. So I think all of that combined really pushed this to a 5-star read for me. And yeah, anyway, I will leave that aside. I might talk about this more in another video, because clearly I have a lot of rambly thoughts on it. But okay, very quickly, I'm gonna try to keep this short. But then I read, oh my god, this is like the best book I read. I read Insurrecto by Gina, Apostol. Let me like get a full focus. It's so funny. It keeps going out of focus. Anyway, so Insurrecto is by the Filipino author Gina, Apostol, and she has a bunch of other books. I'm gonna read them too, but I think that this is kind of like her masterpiece, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's one of her most famous, and yes, definitely not her first book. But anyway, so it's really hard to explain what this book is about, because it has like 3 or 4 different layers, but in a nutshell, if I can try to explain it coherently, it's basically about a Western filmmaker named Kiara, who comes to the Philippines, and she wants to make a movie, and she hires a translator named Magsalan. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Magsalan, I think, actually literally means translator in Tagalog, but yes, that's her name in the book. And Kiara's dad was also a filmmaker, and he was he like went missing and died in the 1970s when he was making a movie in the Philippines. So Kiara, as a way to kind of like get over this trauma and make her own movie and tell her own story, is going to make a movie about the same events that her father's movie was about. which is also a made-up movie, by the way. Is this making any sense? No, I'm sorry. And then, in response to Kiara's movie, Magdalene writes her own movie. So we have like 3 movies going on, and there's like 3 different scripts, really. Well, there's really 2 different scripts, and then there's like the normal narrative of following these 2 characters as they're like going about scouting a location for the movie, etc. So I've like split it up here. I've marked the spots that are I think this one is Magdalene's script that she writes, and that's in response to Kiara's script. And then the rest of the book is like narration. And both of these scripts, though, like underlying all of this is this historical event, which is the massacre of Balangiga. I don't know how to say that. On the island of Samar in the Philippines, which was committed in 1901 by colonist American soldiers in response to an uprising or a revolution by the local indigenous people. Okay. I'm very sorry if that didn't make any sense. I will also include this blurb if you want to like pause. And I have 2 more books left. I'm gonna try to quickly go through them. I grabbed the wrong book. This is not what I read. This is Dry Heart. I actually read The Road to the City by Natalia Ginzburg, who is one of my favorite authors. I discovered her on Bookstagram. I hadn't heard of her, but she's really famous in Italy. She's a famous Italian author. She passed away, but she was very famous. Jewish Italian author. I am a huge fan of like Italian Jewish literature, intellectuals, things like that. I have a big Primo Levi collection over there, which I'm going to be reading through. But yeah, so I freaking love Natalia Ginzburg, and I always post about her on Instagram. I just think she's amazing. I don't think everyone will love this book. Some people might think it's boring. Some people might think it's trivial. But I loved it. I thought it was so good. But yes, so this took place in like a rural village on the periphery of a city. So that's kind of the whole main like theme of the book. It's this road to the city, and it's reflecting this very like rural urban divide, and the way that our narrator, who comes from a poor family in the village, and the way that she kind of like, she's just living with this desire to escape her circumstances, escape her family, her village, and move to the city. And those days where she takes the road to the city, like those are big moments for her, and her life and her family's life kind of all revolves around like being on the periphery of the city and wanting to make a better life for themselves and improve their circumstances. But then at the end, she kind of makes it, but she's still, you know, she lives a very tragic life, basically. But yes, if you like kind of domestic stories, if you like reading about Italy, and if you like these kinds of, you know, social themes, I hate to say it, but social themes, I think you'll definitely like this. And I really recommend checking out Natalia Ginzburg. She's amazing, and I read a lot of her. So I will be discussing a lot of her books on this channel. Okay, the last book that I read, I'm going to really quickly wrap this up, was In Case of Emergency by Mahsa Mohebali. Here we go. This is a contemporary Iranian literature book. Fiction book. Sorry, there we go. Oh my god, I cannot focus it. There we go. And it's from Feminist Press, who's they're a really cool independent publisher, and I'm recently discovering their books. But yes, so this is translated from Persian, and it is, so apparently it was like surprisingly published in Iran, even though it's kind of, you know, politically dangerous. It's a bit, you know, dissenting. It has like vulgar, like crude language. I think it has a queer character that's not super explicitly expressed, but I think like a queer character. And yes, and I think, you know, it's like a big political allegory. So it was like, as it says at the end of this, in the afterword to this book, it was a big surprise that it was able to be published and escape the censors. But the translator says that it's, I think, like, she thinks it might largely be due to the fact that it's, the way that this book is written is very in your face. It's very chaotic. The narrator is very unlikable. She's a mess. She keeps like rambling in her head, and she says like very crude, vulgar things. She hates her mom, but she also kind of loves her mom, you know. So yes, I was really glad to have been able to read this. I'm really happy that they translated it. I think in terms of like personal preference, I didn't love it just because I don't really, you know, I don't really like that kind of like unlikable narrator, kind of chaotic book. Maybe I should interrogate that though, like why? I don't know, but but I really think that like this is a very, very well written book. It's super interesting, and it's also like not sci-fi. I heard this described as sci-fi, and I don't know why, because it's not, but it's definitely kind of I want to say fantastical. It's a little bit unbelievable, maybe magical realism-y. Basically, like there is this kind of environmental event that's happening, like these earthquakes that are happening, and because of that, a lot of people are fleeing Tehran. And yes, so that's kind of the chaotic backdrop to our already chaotic narrator, and who is also, by the way, an addict. So we're kind of like always in her head, like thinking about like her addiction, and she's going through withdrawal. She's just trying to find like you know, a way to cope, and that's kind of overshadowing her narration. So I think it'd be interesting maybe like putting this in, like comparing this to a novel like Trainspotting, and other depictions of addiction, because this also touches on like, because that addiction, the way that it's portrayed here, could be paralleled with like censorship and an authoritarian regime and all kinds of political themes. Yes, and there's a lot of talk about gender in here as well, which is really interesting. So all that being said, this is a really well written, very interesting book. I'm very glad to have been able to read it, and I really recommend it if it sounds like something you would like. If you like Oteza Moshfegh, is that her name? Is that how you say it? The author who wrote My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and also Eileen. If you liked Eileen, you might like this book, like another kind of like unlikable narrator, and it's kind of like grim and like graphic. Yes, so fans of her writing or those kinds of narrators would definitely like this, I think. I personally am not a fan, but that's okay. It's just personal preference. I am not like shading anybody who likes it at all. But yes, so this is the final book that I read in February. I'm already off to a pretty good start in terms of my March reads, and yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it wasn't too long and rambly. I'm going to try to edit it down. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be back with probably a March wrap up. I might do some reading vlogs, or I might do individual videos on my favorite authors and series that I like, etc. Yes, thank you for watching again.